All right. Hi, everyone. Thanks so much for joining us for our Ask the Experts panel this afternoon. My name is Hannah Landers, and I'm the Assistant Director of Career Services here in Pamplin, and I'll be serving as our panel moderator today. We're going to be talking about all things career fair, how you can best prepare and find success at the event. All right, we're going to jump right in because we have lots to cover tonight. We're going to talk to our amazing panelists here. I will start with Jordan. If you could go ahead and introduce yourself and tell us why you are an expert in career fair prep.
Yes. Hi, everyone. If we haven't met before, I'm Jordan. I am a career advisor here on our career team. I've been with Virginia Tech a little over a year now, so I've gotten to see a few fairs and get to engage with the students and the experiences and also talk with the recruiters on what they see. So I'm really excited to kind of go over some tips, tricks, and maybe some common mistakes that we see throughout the fair.
Awesome. Thanks, Jordan. Claire, would you mind introducing yourself as well?
Absolutely. Hi, everyone. My name is Claire Gallo, and I lead the University Recruiting Talent Function at Freddie Mac. We recruit around 400 hires between our analyst full-time student opportunities and our internship positions each year. I've been at Freddie Mac now for 7 years, going on 8. And fun fact, Freddie Mac was actually my first job after college. So clearly I love it here. And truly, this here today is my favorite part of my job. So, getting to engage directly with students at such an exciting time in your career. So, really looking forward to our chat today.
Awesome. All right. And Kirk.
Yes, absolutely. Thank you. Yeah, I'm Kirk Atwell. I'm currently a territory manager for TTI or Techtronic Industries. I've been with TTI now closing in on a year and a half, and major job function for me, a part of what I do is campus recruiting, looking for top tier talent off of VT's campus, as well as recruiting elsewhere, right? From anywhere from people that already have jobs to people looking. So we're always looking for talent to come in and make a career and make waves for us. And it's an honor to be here and be able to speak to all y'all.
Awesome. Thank you, guys. So for our student participants, please feel free to throw questions in the chat at any time. We have some set questions we're going to get started with, but we'd love to hear from you as well on what you want to know from our panelists. So go ahead and throw those in and we will ask our panelists. All right, I'm going to stop sharing and so you can see everyone's lovely face. All right, let's start with you, Jordan. The first question we have, can you share some common mistakes that students make when preparing for a career fair and how can they avoid them?
Yes. So I would say the most common that I've seen is just not being prepared at all, kind of going in there and thinking they're going to wing it. And they're feeling kind of confident in themselves in that. And I think they go in and kind of get a little overwhelmed. I do think kind of being able to not have that situation is doing your research a little bit more. To not have that mistake, and you will have better conversations, really feeling more confident when you leave. So that would be the most common mistake that I see personally with my students is they're just not doing their research on who should I talk to, who's going to be at the career fair, and what are they looking for.
100%, yes. And if you all were not aware, our career fairs on Handshake. You can access the full list of attending companies. You can filter by your major, whether they're looking for your class level, internship, full-time, and make a game plan for the day. Great advice, Jordan. All right, Claire, can I toss the same question to you? What are some common mistakes?
Absolutely. So, I would say a big thing when I'm talking to students is remembering be open minded. Like, you may have your sights on specific employers, but don't forget that you're there to be exposed to everything that's available to you on the job market. So don't feel limited by your major or your intended industry. Skill transfer, so meaning like the skills that you have can be used for a multitude of jobs, is a real thing and it's really important. So make sure you take full advantage of it. I mean, how many times have we been, listening to an executive speaker or professor even, and they talk about that they were one major in college and next thing you know, they're in a different career altogether that doesn't seem aligned and yet they're thriving. So that's always my biggest recommendation. Absolutely go in with a plan because you want to take the most, get the most out of it. But at the same time, remain flexible enough because you just never know what's around the corner for you.
100%. I think one thing I'll add on to that too is a lot of times when students filter on Handshake, right, and they see, okay, these are all the companies hiring for cybersecurity. That doesn't necessarily mean that they have a specific cybersecurity position, but just that they're open to hiring that major. So that's something important to manage expectations and make sure you're thinking about that when you're planning your day. So be open to all of those. There might be a really cool opportunity in something that looks a little bit different than what you initially envisioned.
Absolutely.
All right, and Kirk, what common mistakes do you see?
Yeah, for sure. I think a big thing is just the overall mindset when you walk in the room, right? So when you're walking in the room, the mindset of let me find the company with the highest paying entry level job or the company that has the best location for exactly what you're looking for is the mentality that you're coming in to find a career, right? So a lot of people, Claire's one of them that, the first job they got right out of school is what they're still rocking with, right? So be able to have the open-mindedness and the mentality that, I'm looking for a career. Maybe it's not the first job that gives me exactly the pay that I'm looking for with my 4-year degree or 4-year degree plus master's, but how can I go from that to build a career that's going to be 5, 10 years down the line and looking for the next 2 to 3 positions instead of the one that you're staring down the barrel of when you're speaking directly to those recruiters at Business Horizons.
Yeah, I could actually go off of Kirk real quick there because very similar to my own story. Just to put it out there, I was a public relations major. All of my internships were in communications and various communication departments. And I was convinced I was going to be like the next PR manager somewhere. And very much clearly I'm not. But it's because a random opportunity came across and it made so much sense to me and clearly found such value in it. And so much of what I learned in school very much applies to my job here. So totally echoing off of Kirk there of like, that's so important.
Yeah, and okay, I'll tell a personal story as well. I was a Virginia Tech student. At my first Business Horizons, I started with a company to just kind of get the jitters out. I was nervous. I went to a company with no line. That was my first job. I ended up working there. So keep an open mind, try new things, try talking to companies because really you never know. Like your path might look very different than what you're envisioning now, and that's totally fine. All right, we have a really good question in the chat as a follow-up, Jordan, to what you were speaking about. When they are conducting research on companies and kind of making a plan, what are some of the things they should be looking for? And then what kind of questions should they have ready for the company based on that?
Yeah, I think it's going to depend on personal preference and what you're looking for and your goals. But I would take a look at the company's websites. Who are they? What do they do? What's their missions? Does it align with something that you are interested in? So having a general understanding of what they are, who they are, what they do, and then maybe go ahead and start looking at positions they currently have. What would that align with something that you're interested in? Maybe looking them up on Handshake and LinkedIn, looking at some other maybe alumni that have worked there and see what they do. There's different routes of research. But starting with their website, I think is a great idea, and just having an understanding and going in knowing what you're talking about to have a specific question, whether that's about the company or a certain position. Being prepared and having a more thoughtful question, I think would go further in a conversation with a recruiter.
Yeah, totally agree. I mean, starting on their website, understanding what they do is so important. I think both Claire and Kirk would agree. Recruiters don't love when you walk up and say, "So what do you guys do?" We don't love that. So try to make sure that you have a good understanding just of what industry they're in, kind of a general basis of what they offer and what they do. Kirk, could you talk a little bit about some of the questions that you like to get from students to kind of kick off that conversation?
Yeah, yeah. One of the things that makes students stand out when they come up to our booth, especially at Business Horizons or even through the interview process, is once they've done their basic due diligence on knowing just what TTI is or the fact that we sell power tools or anything like that is already a check mark in the books. But it's asking higher level questions that maybe we're not always hearing, right? Something like, how are you guys winning versus the competitors, right? What do you guys see as the top 3 qualities of someone who does really, really well in your company, one that excels their career in the first 3, 4 years that they're there, right? Something higher level more so than, okay, what are your brands or, where are you guys located? It's the questions that make me think, okay, you're asking the questions because you actually want to work here, not the questions just because it's what everyone else asks.
Yeah, absolutely. Claire, any other thoughts there on questions you like to hear as a recruiter?
Yeah, I think, even if it's just questions, but also again, how you show up as yourself. Like one of the things that I see from employees of ours who go to career fairs, from our own experience, or even honestly hiring managers and interviews is you're already able to show what you can give to the company. So that idea, because you could have based off of what Kirk and Jordan have shared of you've already done your own research on the company, now pull it back to something that you've already done. So if there is a project that you've done in school that you know is aligned to what that company does, or it has skills that you know that could make an impact, I think that's a great way to already start showcasing not only your interest due to research you've done, but how you already know you could start applying and supporting the company and their goals and mission.
Yeah, so right there is another great example of what you should be researching when you're looking these companies up is what kind of projects are they working on? What are the qualifications preferred and required of the job descriptions that you're interested in to really kind of hone in on what Claire was talking about and how you can tailor your elevator pitch to the company. So speaking of elevator pitches, what are some tips on how to make a memorable first impression when these students are speaking with recruiters at a career fair? Kirk, I'm going to start with you.
Yeah, elevator pitches are great, right? They give us a snapshot of who you are. I think something that's underutilized is just a basic introduction, right? Something more so along the lines of instead of just your name and then we go right into it, it's, hi, my name is blank and blank. How are you doing today? This is why I went to VT, like all of these things. We always like to take a step back and, why'd you choose Virginia Tech, maybe over some of the other colleges in Virginia or North Carolina, and really get to know you a little bit on a personal level. And then we can go into speaking about what you've been able to do in your time at Virginia Tech through clubs and classes and major and the rest of it, because it gives us a good look at, okay, this is not just someone who's practiced a 2-minute speech. This is actually a real person. And it tends to be much more of a fruitful conversation than it is just like we're talking to a robot almost.
Yeah, absolutely. And Jordan, what's some advice you give students who are kind of practicing that elevator pitch and how to avoid the robotic side of things?
Yeah, I mean, I was kind of thinking the exact same thing that Kirk said. They are people just like us. You do not have to have this very perfect speech, and don't be afraid to, break the ice. How is your day going? Those type of things. Um, be yourself. Don't be robotic. Be confident. Um, share who you are, your major, maybe a goal or something that you are looking to achieve. What are your interests? How can you align yourself there? But I always like to say, show your personality a little bit. Um, that's my biggest thing with elevator pitches. They are people. Be yourself.
Yeah, they are people, guys. You can ask how their day is going. You can talk about the weather. Like you can just get to know them a little bit instead of just running right into your elevator pitch. I think sometimes that can be a little awkward for someone standing at a table to have that instead of like a human connection. So I totally agree with that. Claire, other thoughts on making a good first impression?
Yeah, I think, Kirk and Jordan really spoke to the elevator pitch itself, and the whole idea of the point of having an elevator pitch is to maximize your time. Because it's also remembering too, there are a lot of people at the fair, there's a lot of employers there, which is great. Because again, you're being able to have as much opportunity as possible. But then I think about, okay, so if I know I'm only going to have a few minutes here with this person, what do I really want to talk about? And so that's where I think a big piece of advice is apply to jobs already. If you're already putting on the hard work of researching the company, go ahead and apply. Because what's great is once you're talking to that representative, whether they're a recruiter or a business representative, you're able to say, hey, I've already applied for X, Y, and Z jobs. So now they know, oh, I don't have to walk you through the career site. I don't have to walk you through what it means to apply for a job here. We can get down and dirty into like the business of that. And especially if it's already a specific job, you could be like, all right, so what does it mean to have this job? Like Kirk was saying, like, what does it mean to be a rock star at your company? And you can get really granular there, which will also give you great insight going into the interview. So it kind of is a win-win in multiple ways.
Yeah, 100%. You guys don't have to wait to apply. I get that question a lot. It's actually a really good icebreaker, as Claire said, to just jump right into the more nitty-gritty of the role and what the next steps could be. I mean, that's so great to already have that connection, and it shows how interested you are, which is awesome. So
yeah. So that way, like career fairs don't have to be a first impression. They're actually just a continuation of the relationship itself.
yeah,
Absolutely.
which is important because I think sometimes students walk into a career fair and are expecting to come out with an offer, or with a job in hand. And really what we're looking for with a career fair is to build a connection with the recruiter, learn more, and then go apply. That's typically what the process looks like. So I'm wondering, Kirk, I'll go with you. What are some thoughts on continuing the relationship with that company after the career fair, knowing that that might be the first step and not the job offer step?
Yeah, absolutely. I know for us, I know many other companies do this too, is we have engagement platforms, right? Whether it's Yellow or it's Handshake or LinkedIn, always making sure that before you leave that table, you inquire about those if they're not immediately presented to you, right? So, hey, do you have a yellow QR code? Do you have some type of a Google form that I can be put into? That's a really good way for us to be able to reach out to you, right? If we want to continue that conversation further. And the other thing is too, is there's nothing wrong with searching up a name on LinkedIn, right? And shooting that message and saying, hey, I really enjoyed our conversation today. I really liked what you had to say and X, Y, and Z about the points of what it makes to be a good employee at your company. I would love to further this conversation if that's something that you guys are interested in, right? So there's really formal ways to do it, and there's also really informal ways to do it. And I think both can be impactful in their own ways. And how you can continue the conversation should be your number one priority the moment you walk away from the table.
Yeah, so what Kirk just said is connecting, right? And you can only do that with the name of the recruiter. So let me just reiterate how important it is to write that down as soon as they share it. Get a card if they have one, write down their email if they share it with you. But that's really important that you don't lose that connection because you just had a great elevator pitch, you went through the conversation, and then you don't remember the recruiter's name and there's no way to connect with them on LinkedIn. So make sure you're getting that information and writing it down in your notebook. And on that note, we had someone ask in the chat, do we need to bring anything else besides resumes? Jordan, do you want to talk a little bit about that?
Yeah, pen, paper, take us some notes, write down contact information if they don't have cards. Unfortunately, we can't give out their information, so that is up to you to have that, write it down, connect with them. Don't bring your book bags unless you want to check them in downstairs if you've got to run for school or for class. But a Padfolio is usually typical what students will bring. Put your resumes in there, have your notes on who you want to talk to, your little research, and have a pen to write additional notes after talking to recruiters if you wish to do that.
Awesome. Okay. Claire, a question for you. Is it better to approach a wide variety of employers or focus in on a few on Career Fair Day?
Yeah, that's a really good question. So I always lean on focusing on a few as opposed to the whole. So in that way, you can really try to foster those genuine connections. So again, it's remembering that there's a lot of activity happening at a fair. And so, companies are meeting a bunch of students all day long. And so you really kind of want to be more of a big fish in a smaller pond in that way. So being able to spend that extra amount of time with an employer. And I think thinking about that too, it's very easy to sometimes get overwhelmed by the company that has a long line. Like maybe there's a lot of students for whatever reason, a bunch of students want to go and talk to that one employer, but maybe you go seek out the others, the ones that maybe don't have as many students, because that's where you're going to be able to, once again, maximize your opportunity there. So there's so many strategies that you can kind of go into a career fair with, but I definitely lean on smaller number of employers with a greater outreach and engagement.
And can I ask you, Claire, to also elaborate on students kind of keeping that connection with you all? I mean, thinking about Freddie specifically, are there events, emails that they should get on? What's their next step?
Yeah, no, I will say something I really appreciated Jordan saying is remembering that we're all human. And so same thing goes for any employee representative at a table. Once again, if you're feeling overwhelmed by how many employers there are, think about how the employer is feeling with how many students there are. And again, it's such a positive thing, but it's a whirlwind at times. So I think when it comes to follow-up, it's remaining realistic of your expectations there, because I think it's, really difficult sometimes when so many students are reaching out to us and we want to connect to all of them one-on-one, but just realistically you can't. And so I think it's about getting creative on what that follow-up is. So I really like how Kirk spoke to, employers are investing in a bunch of platforms to be able to stay in touch with you. So whether that's a handshake, a Gallo, you name it, they'll have newsletters that you can sign up for. So I think it's maximizing those. One thing that we take advantage of at Freddie Mac is that we continue to host information sessions regularly. So that is through us. Sometimes it's even school agnostic, where it'll be living on our career site under the events tab, where you can regularly engage with us. You can ask questions, understand more about who we are and our opportunities. And again, that's directly with our recruiting team. So a lot of companies will continue to do that, again, just to have multiple touch points with you throughout the recruitment process.
So a quick follow-up, how important is it that students go to multiple of these different events that you're hosting?
See, that's the thing, because it sometimes can feel like finding a job is a full-time job in of itself. And I always have to remind hiring managers alike that these are students who not only are looking to pursue a career, but they also are still in school. and they also deserve to have a social life and to just have like a full life in general. And so, yeah, I think sometimes it can be really hard to hear of, okay, wait, so I'm expected to go to the career fair, but then with all of these companies that sign up for this newsletter, go on this on LinkedIn, and then they're doing these info sessions. So that's where I think, again, being intentional on what companies you're engaging with as opposed to like the whole. Like, if you can narrow it down for yourself, the 5 or 6 companies that really make sense for you, and that might even seem like a large number. Again, it's up to you. And then that's where you can put your effort into it. That I always think kind of comes out best.
Okay, awesome. That was super helpful. All right, we're getting a bunch of great questions in the chat. So Kirk, can you answer Kevin's question? Any advice for people who are only looking for internships, either this summer or next summer?
Yeah, for sure. And I think that's something that should definitely be included in that elevator pitch, right? Once we can understand the moment that we hear sophomore, junior, right, or even freshman, we understand, okay, this person's most likely looking for some form of an internship because they do have school left, right? So kind of getting that out of the way first, so that way the conversation from the recruiter's perspective is geared in a completely different way. The amount of conversations that we would have that by the time we're halfway through the conversation, it gets brought up, oh yeah, I'm a junior looking for an internship. And the whole thing that I've been talking about or something else has been about a full-time position, right? And so everything can change because logistics about interviews and next steps and, the things that we want to make sure to highlight completely change. So it's one of those that be upfront about it, right? There's nothing to be ashamed of if you're looking for an internship, right? It's a great thing to look for. It definitely helps build that resume and build your portfolio of expertise to be able to speak to. So I would say just be upfront about it, right? And then have that candid conversation with the recruiter that you're speaking to.
That's great. And I also just wanted to make a clarification. Something I hear a lot from students is the confusion as far as like your class level when it comes to credits versus years. Companies are really, and correct me if I'm wrong, Kirk, but companies are typically really only interested in your graduation date. So I would not answer that question as far as credits. Like if you're a sophomore graduating in 2027, but credits wise you're a junior, then you're a sophomore, because that's really important. You're kind of looping yourself out of opportunities if you go by your credits. It's really just by your graduation year. Just wanted to make that clarification. Okay, Jordan, the next question, what kinds of things do you think are especially important to include in your elevator pitch along with things Kirk just shared? Is there anything else that's important to include?
Who you are, what you're looking for, of course, what your major is. And then I usually what I would hear is your thoughtful question. Bring in the question, what do you want to ask about? And that kind of redirects the conversation, in my opinion. So my advice would be a good, thoughtful question. Break the ice in the conversation. That's how you kind of build that bridge from your pitch to, okay, let's not make this awkward. Now, what do we talk about? So break it with that question.
Yeah, and then Claire, I know something that was mentioned was, in addition to those things, is the experience part. Talk a little bit about your experience and how it connects to projects. I get the question a lot, like how much should I share as far as experience? Could you talk a little bit about that?
Yeah, I think I would focus on the experience that is most relevant to the employer you're speaking to. And that goes hand in hand with even developing your own resume or how you're talking in an interview, because it's incredible what you all accomplish. I mean, heck, I feel like I speak for all 4 of us. It hasn't been that long since the 4 of us were in college, and yet I can't believe all that you guys do now because I can't relate sometimes. And so, yeah, your resumes and your experience is incredible and long, but because you have a little bit of time there, I would just maximize the experience that really is relevant there and one that the employer is interested in. So you don't have to get into your high school curriculars. You don't even have to get into all the curriculars you do at school. Just focus whether it's an internship, a project, a class that you took that can spark a conversation. That I think is key.
Yeah, I love that. Thanks, Claire. All right, Jordan, any recommendations for freshmen and sophomores attending the fair that many recruiters may not be looking for at that time?
Yeah. If it's your first one you're going to, it's really kind of getting a feel for that environment. It gets overwhelming really quickly. That's why it kind of goes back to being prepared, do your research. But it's starting your connection, starting your networking. I'm a firm believer if you put in the work now, it's going to pay off in the long run. So starting as a freshman and sophomore And usually at our career fairs, we have the same recruiters. So if you are consistent, they're going to know who you are. You're going to have consistent conversations. And I think that builds that relationship that Claire was talking about earlier. So going in as a freshman, sophomore, you do need to have expectations depending on the companies that you're talking to and what's available, having your own goals in mind there. But it's getting the practice in, getting connections, and starting your networking, and then it will build from there.
Yeah, that's great advice, Jordan. And Kirk, I'm curious from your perspective on the recruiter side, any additional comments for freshmen and sophomores?
Yeah, for sure. I think the other thing is it's never too early to make a good first impression, right? So regardless if you're a junior or senior and you're looking for that full-time job or internship, right? If I have a freshman come up to me and we have a killer conversation, right? I'm not only going to remember your face, but I'm going to also make sure to pin your name, right? If I see that you're already doing things when you are less than a year out of being out of high school, imagine what you can do after 4 years of being, at a major university like Virginia Tech, right? So by no means, if we have a good first conversation, are we just going to forget it and you have to come up and speak to us again, or we hope that we run into one another. It's something that can definitely foster a good thing for you 2, 3, 4 years down the line.
Yeah, I mean, Kirk is going to be there next week, guys, with Business Horizons. He's also been at the last several. So, you can make these connections and then build on them in future fairs. So definitely.
Yeah, we've had multiple people that have come from freshman year and then we've looped them all the way back in their senior year and they work full time with us right now, right? So they made a good enough first impression that even through recruiters in our company that have moved on to other positions have made sure to email back to the current recruiter saying, hey, you really need to talk to this person and make sure they come by your booth because they impressed me then and I can only guarantee you they'll impress you now.
That's awesome. Okay, let's see. How can students stand out in a crowded space when competing for attention? Jordan, I'll throw this one to you. I know a lot of students tell us that it feels very overwhelming. So any tips for kind of navigating that crowded space?
Yeah, it goes back to the research again. I would have a good list of, these are the top 5 people that I really, really want to talk to. And then, if I have time, I can talk to these. So doing your research, having your notes, having those thoughtful questions, that's going to help you stand out. Your personality, let's see, confidence, being an active listener, showing enthusiasm, and I also think I guess this would be more of after the fair, but the following up afterwards, I feel like a lot of students skip that step, and I feel like that also plays into recruiters and how you kind of stand out there. Um, so I think confidence, enthusiasm, do your research, and come with those thoughtful questions, and that does help you stand out outside of your resume, of course.
100%. Demeanor means a lot. You're getting to know these people and they're kind of seeing if you're a culture fit and if you're excited about what they're offering. So it's really important to get the energy up, even if you're feeling overwhelmed in the moment.
Body language, active listening.
Something I wanted to point out that I think does not help you stand out in a negative way is when your resume is super different. I get that question a lot. Should my resume have my picture or color or like I made, this nice, very visually appealing resume to stand out? And ultimately, the recruiters that I've talked to, and Claire, I would love your opinion on this too. That is a negative because they're trying to very quickly navigate your resume and find all this great information. So thoughts on resumes and formats and what that should look like?
Oh, we love a resume. Yeah, I have always said you need to think about like how we're used to reading left to right. Know that when you're looking at a resume, we're going top down. And so, very similar, Hannah, you brought this up earlier about the graduation dates. That's one of my number one tips for students is that because so many of the jobs that you're looking at, your graduation date highly, qualifies you for whichever one. Have your education at the top. Make it very clear whether it's expected graduation date, if you graduate, whatever it is, have that clear at the top along with your major. It's amazing sometimes too how majors can get hidden. And again, there's a difference between being a business major versus like a computer science major. So you want to make that clear for employers. Then I always recommend going for professional experience. Then you can get into coursework and your skills or any extracurriculars. But yeah, absolutely. When it comes to resumes, Hannah, I think you're right on the money there. And I always recommend education at the top. Please, please, please.
Awesome. Okay. Another thing we hear a lot is just nerves, like going along with that crowded environment. Kirk, any suggestions for students who maybe they're going for the first time or maybe just aren't feeling confident but still want to get the most out of an event like this?
Yeah, absolutely. I think, one of the biggest misconceptions, and it goes back to that mindset thing that I talked about earlier, is even though that, this is a big opportunity to talk to a recruiter and really get to learn and, show yourself, it's not an interview, right? We don't have to have the same pent up nerves as if we were walking in and based off this conversation or not, it's make or break, right? At the end of the day, we're here to see you as a person. We're here to see you as someone who's a part of an educational system. And if all those things align, then that's what stands out, right? So, I would say take a breath in the sense of, this isn't the final interview. This isn't make or break. Just show yourself, show your positive personality, and the rest of it will shine through, right? Just as speaking to Claire's resume thing, the resume shows me exactly what you want to show me from a formal standpoint. I can only understand who you are as a person is if we have a good conversation, right? So if it's acting as if it's question and answer instead of a flowing conversation as if you're talking with one of your friends, I think is pretty good advice.
Yeah, that's great. Jordan, anything to add? I know you've met with some students who kind of feel apprehensive about the experience. Anything to share?
Yeah, I meet with a lot of students that talk about nerves. And the first thing, that's validating. It is. Yes, that's completely normal. You are not the only one, I promise. So be yourself. Some advice that I give some students that are very more introverted, I say, set small achievable goals and then build on that. I'm going to talk to at least 3 recruiters. I'm going to ask 2 meaningful questions. And then once you hit that goal, you're like, okay, maybe I got this. Hopefully your nerves are settled by then. And then you can kind of move forward and be more confident and just continue the conversations, connect with them.
Yeah, that's great advice. And I will also give a plug. Jordan will be at the front doors at a table for you to practice. If you want to practice your elevator pitch, we have our career advisors set up there to answer questions, maybe just get the nerves out, double check your company list. So swing by, say hi to Jordan on your way in for sure. All right, I want to do kind of a round robin with this next question because this is do's and don'ts, and I think there's a lot in this category. So I'm going to start with Claire. Can you share some do's and don'ts for going to a career fair?
I always think, I know this is hard to hear, but like dress professionally. It's just better to be overdressed than underdressed. And of course, so the rules of that is changing in society. So I'm not saying you have to show up in a tie. You can very much be in a suit jacket and a button down. You could just be in a pantsuit. You don't have to be in a dress with heels and all that kind of stuff. I would not recommend wearing heels just because if you're going to be walking around so much and you're trying to engage in conversation, don't have your feet hurt. That's awful. So again, err on that side of it. It's just better to show up clean. They always talk about that. Like if you look good, you feel good. So talk about having that little bit of confidence boost for yourself. So yeah, that's always my number one go-to.
Awesome. Jordan, I'll kick it over to you.
Yeah, I made a list so I wouldn't forget any. Excuse me, you guys. I also had dress professionally. First impression there, dress good, feel good. Keep good eye contact is a good professional manner. Active listening and being engaging, respect the recruiter's time, collect the cards and information. And then for don'ts, I have be unprepared. Uh, don't ramble off topic too much to where you get lost in conversation and it just kind of really gets off track. Don't interrupt. And then I would not ask about salaries. I don't think that there's a time and place for everything. So I think that is a don't.
Yeah, 100% agree. Claire, it looked like you agreed with that strongly. Any other thoughts on that last one?
I appreciated that, Jordan, because compensation is such like a tricky, topic at times. And so yeah, this is the time where we want to get to know you, and we'll get like down and dirty into the business of like, those job details at that, at a different time. So no, I just echo that through and through.
Awesome. And Kirk, do's and don'ts, please.
Yeah, I would say one of the do's is definitely do your due diligence on what you specifically want to highlight about yourself, right? To be able, so when you come in, you can speak confidently to it, and it's not as if you're pulling from random scenarios and different situations. It's like, okay, I know I want to highlight 1, 2, and 3. So that way, when it's coming out, it comes out excited, it comes with energy. And I would say one of the don'ts is even though all of you guys have worked super hard to make your resume super extensive in your extracurriculars and your classwork is to just dump all of that on us, right? To where it's more of a speech to us about who you are than it is a conversation of, oh, okay, you worked at this over the summer. Well, tell me how that worked out for you, right? Instead of it's just read, 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 and then dump. And then all of a sudden I can't remember where you're from or what it is, and I've lost track. And so I would say definitely know what you want to talk about and be able to speak to it confidently, and don't dump it on us because I want to remember you and I want to remember what you have to say. So.
Yeah, and that reminded me too of something else on your list, Jordan, I really loved was respecting the recruiter's time. Claire mentioned there's going to be lines. I know that's unfortunate, but there's just so many students in Pamplin and they're all excited to talk to companies. So respecting the recruiter's time and the students that are behind you in line, right? So obviously we want you to get the most out of the conversation, but try to read cues and just know that again, this is not the end all be all. You're making that impression, you're going to follow up and you're going to continue the conversation. So just be mindful of that. You know, there's a lot of students that want to move through and have these conversations. And hopefully you'll be able to connect with them either at another event or an info session like Freddie has or something else that's going on. We also will be having another plug, an after hours networking event the night of Business Horizons, and some of our recruiters will be joining us there. So if you're looking for kind of that additional conversation in a more relaxed setting, highly suggest that you join us. And that's on our calendar as well. All right. So another question we have in the chat is about international students navigating the career fair, kind of identifying where they should talk to and find the most success. So Jordan, I'd love if you could speak to that a little bit.
Yeah, definitely check out the our website, and you can filter out to see which companies are showing that they do sponsor and talk with international students as of right now. Making those connections and kind of going there, asking the question. Again, having your pitch and being who you are, have the conversation, but being able to ask, what can I do now? Or how do you all sponsor? What are the opportunities for me? So it's really doing your research on that side and knowing really you don't want to talk to a company that you know is not going to be able to sponsor you at that point. That would be my initial. I mean, I'm sure Claire and Kirk have a little bit more on the recruiter side of that, but when I'm speaking with students, my thought is do the research, know who to talk to, know your audience there.
Yeah, great advice. Kirk, do you have anything else to add there as far as I know you guys may not work directly with international students, but just how to navigate that process of going through the career fair?
Yeah, absolutely. I think a lot of companies, obviously, when we're based in the United States, right, we're looking for those domestically based jobs, but there are a lot of companies that are international, right? So there is nothing to be said that just because the recruiter you're speaking to is hiring for something in Blacksburg, Virginia, that there isn't another facet of the company that is hiring in South America, is hiring in Mexico or in Europe or Australia or Asia or wherever it might be, right? So having that to be like, hey, if you guys don't offer sponsorship for the United States, right? I'm originally from Mexico. Is there a way for me to be able to get in contact with the right people down there to see if there's a way that I could still start my career with your company, just maybe not in the domestic United States, right? So.
Yeah, that's great advice. Kind of along with that question, another question we have is how to understand which recruiters are for you. And Jordan, you talked a little bit about making a list. So can you talk more about kind of identifying for your class level and major as well?
As in the recruiter side, or like
From a student perspective, like how to build your list of companies.
yeah, it goes again. Everything I feel like is around the research. So I feel like I'm saying that a lot, but it really is. So looking who they are, what they do, does it align with what you're looking for? Yeah, I do say make a top 5. This is who I know I am interested in for sure. Maybe, the next 5 or 6 is if I have time, if the lines are not long, I would really like to kind of check out who these recruiters are, what they learn more about that kind of company. Am I answering that question? I mean, I felt like it was a little vague, but
No, that's super helpful. I think the other thing I would mention is just in the career fair itself, our companies will have signs physically on the booth that will show whether they're looking for certain class levels, whether they're looking for international students, what majors they're open to. And again, we talked about that's just, which majors they're open to hiring, not necessarily their industry. So that'll have to be the research on your end. But hopefully that will help you navigate the fair in addition to the research you've done ahead of time.
yeah, if you have your portfolio, write them down. It's okay if you're standing in line. open up your notes and say, okay, with this company, you know, this is what they do. Have some notes on it to refresh your memory. Yeah, I agree with that. Write it down, check out the signs, have your phone. Everybody has their phones out, you know, do a little research there.
Yeah.
If I could add to that, Hannah, I
Yeah.
will say I just gotta also call out, as students at Virginia Tech, you guys have incredible resources available to you. Like, it is amazing. Like, even when Jordan was just talking about the fact that you can go ahead and filter on employees, whether it's based on work authorization or their majors. I am so grateful when students say that they've engaged with their career center, because it's amazing how many students do not, and how much you see universities investing into their career centers to ensure that you are best equipped to find the right job for you. And whether that's because, you know, schools are making investments with employers to help them bring them onto campus, whether it's exposing you all to the resources that are available to have the knowledge to set yourself up for success. So really just taking a second to even just thank Hannah and Jordan and all of their colleagues for all that they're doing for you guys, because it's amazing to see.
Thanks, Claire. Appreciate that. Yeah, we would love if all students came and saw us before the career fair. We would love to prep you guys. And I think, you know, thinking about the future too, obviously this one's coming up next week, but there's plenty of time before the fall fair. We would love to get engaged and help your resume be prepped and just make sure you're confident about which companies you want to talk to and help you navigate the process. So thanks for the shout out. All right, guys. Well, we're wrapping up on questions on our end. I'm going to have Kirk do a little plug because they will be at Business Horizons. If there's any last minute questions, stick them in the chat now as he's talking so we can make sure to answer it. But Kirk, if you want to talk a little bit about TTI.
Awesome. Thank you, Hannah. Right. Yeah. So TTI or Techtronic, right, we'll be there next week. A couple different opportunities if you want to come see us. We'll be at the Business Horizons pre-day, right, living in the Pamplin atrium for 10 to 2 on that Wednesday. And then obviously we'll have, we got 2 booths this year, which is exciting. So we're going to be rocking 2 booths in Squires for the actual Business Horizons, right? So TTI, we're looking for people that are hungry, right? We want to look for people like I spoke to before that are searching for those long-term careers, that really want to grow and develop and take what they've learned at VT and apply it, but also take the other skills that they want to develop in and grow them even more, right? So we pull from all majors. We're not going to just say we're only going to pull from one place or another, right? As much as we value and honor the degree that you're working so hard for, we like who you are as a person, right? I think that can speak so much more volumes as to who you are and what you can do and make a larger impact for our company. And the one thing that I wanted to add on to earlier was that, you know, look for, when you're doing research for companies, just as much as you're trying to show how much value you can bring to the company, also see which companies can bring the most value to you, right? So when you're looking at, it goes hand in hand, right? When you're looking at their website and growth and inclusion and all these other things are the things that really mean the most to you, right? The company websites do a great job of calling that out. So if you're looking for companies and those things are standing out to you, that brings value to you, which is just as important as how much value you can bring to the company.
Yeah, absolutely. Awesome. Well, I wanted to throw our events calendar into the chat. We have a couple of other prep events next week. We have Prepare for the Fair with Pamplin Career Services. There's going to be a career closet pop-up, resume review, practice your elevator pitch. Please swing by. We're going to have recruiters doing the practice elevator pitch and resume review. So if you want inside scoop on whether or not your resume is ready to go, that's where you get it. I also wanted to just give a little bit of logistics information. You will need a name tag to go into Business Horizons. So we're going to have advanced check-in where you can pick up your name tag next week. That's also on the calendar I shared. You can also get it the morning of. That's totally fine. There might be a line, so just be aware of that. Factor that into your schedule, but you'll need your name tag and you can keep that to go in and out of the event. So just to be aware. I think that's all. Any other questions? Please feel free to reach out to Pamplin Career Services. I will also put our email. Oh, we got one just under the wire. How would we recommend a student who transferred into Pamplin structure their resume? Any thoughts on that? Kirk, I'll kick that one over to you to start.
Yeah, I mean, it's just all about your experience, right? So even if you've transferred in from another major university or whether it be a community college or, you know, whatever it might have been, right? Your experience is still your experience. So highlighting the things that you want to from what you've done before, just because you're a transferred in student doesn't bar you and make you any less credible than someone who has been at VT from the jump of their freshman year, right? You know, I would say looking at that career path of like, or growth path of, okay, I'm graduating here just because I transferred, I got another year, even if you might be credits wise that sophomore or junior. So making sure to call that out, but understanding that, there is, everyone has a different path, right? If someone came in, I know some people within our company that were major transfer students, right? Did 2 years somewhere else, went here, and then now that they're excelling within our company. So, just speak to your experience as best as you can.
Awesome. And then Claire, just to kind of follow up on that, some students will transfer in maybe from another major, right? So have experience that doesn't match what they're currently looking for. How would you recommend a student talk about that and maybe on resume as well?
Yeah, honestly, when I hear that somebody changed their majors, I say good for them because they knew what they wanted and they went after it. They didn't stay because they feel like they had to. And if anything, you're just expanding your skills and you're expanding on your own experience. So for that, I would make sure you speak to that. And just so, because it can also speak to your passion. And you're able to be like, I know, because maybe what was it? Why did you change it? Was it because you had an internship that introduced you to a new industry that you didn't know existed? Maybe you took one class with a professor who's super impactful and introduced you to a major or a job that you didn't know existed before. I actually think that's a really great narrative to be able to share with an employer. So I would make sure to highlight that. And if I may, Hannah, I also wanted to call out too, when you're talking to companies, ask them about timing and their job application timing, because it's amazing how early companies are now starting to recruit. I see Kirk shaking his hand, so I think he and I both know the feeling of this, because what breaks my heart is when students come to us and say, hey, I'm in the market now for an internship, and we have to say, we had our applications posted almost 6 months ago. So even when we were speaking to freshmen and sophomores earlier, I think a number one question you can start asking employers is, when do your internship applications go live? When do your student full-time positions go live? So in that way, you could be right there when they go live. So just something to keep in mind, because I see that come up all the time when talking to students.
Claire, I have a question for you to kind of bounce off that. I know some employers that we work with have job alerts on their website. Is that something that you all do as well? So go in, and if you know you are interested in that, sign up for the job alert so you don't miss out.
Exactly. Or you'll see something called like a talent community. Make sure you join those too, because you'll get a monthly newsletter. And again, companies are working with their communication teams constantly to make sure that the most up-to-date jobs are there. You could also follow companies on LinkedIn. They're going to be posting when applications go live. But again, timing gets really tricky with, these kind of roles sometimes. So I just always want to make sure students know.
Yeah, it is really important. I mean, the recruiting season, the bulk of that is in the fall semester. So obviously we still have opportunities. We have a whole career fair. So it's not, but you will have much more options if you're starting off, versus starting in the spring. So just to keep in mind, hopefully for the future, we'll see you guys all at Fall Business Horizons if you're looking for something for that summer 2026. But no, there are still opportunities. So don't panic if that's you that's just getting started.
Yeah, no, not causing any panic whatsoever. There are plenty of opportunities, but just knowing even in the future for yourself.
Awesome. All right. I'm going to do one last piece of advice from everyone while we're waiting, and then I think we are good to wrap up. Jordan, what's your last advice for students at the career fair?
Ooh, I feel like the best advice that I've been giving students recently, and you all kind of touched on it a little bit earlier, is don't be afraid to look at different industries. Yes, everybody's interested in the big four and all those wonderful. Yes, if you are interested, go speak with them, go apply with them. But every industry needs accounting, needs marketing, needs cyber, needs all the majors. So don't be afraid to look into different industries and see their opportunities. It's all about getting your foot in the door, and you can build on your experiences. So don't feel like you have to talk to a certain type of company, no matter what your major is. Honestly, look in every industry, and I think that you would find more opportunities there.
Yeah, totally agree. That's great advice. All right. One last thing from each. Kirk, you want to go first?
Yeah, I would say is, be confident about who you are, right? I think that speaks volumes the moment you walk in the door. Show your personality. And then the other thing is just think big, right? Don't think small. Think about what it's going to look like for yourself over the next few years instead of the next month, the moment you walk off the stage grabbing your diploma, right? So think big, don't think small.
Awesome. And Claire?
Yeah, and I would say along all those lines is just remain positive. it can, it can get stressful, but it's also a really exciting time because it's amazing for you to be able to find that it's going to just feel so passionate and excited about the work that you get to do. So just when in doubt, remain positive. It's all going to work out. That's always the key here. Everything works out. It works out for a reason. So you guys got this. You are positioned so incredibly well. There is no doubt that you will get the perfect job for you.
Awesome. All right. Well, that's all we have, guys. We're so excited to see you at Business Horizons next week. Thank you so much to our wonderful panelists, and I hope you all have a good night.